So we are here this evening to continue our budget hearings, and we're starting, let's see, about 6:33. So I will turn things over to our city manager, Terrence Moore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Much appreciated. Again, this is the third budget workshop meeting in a series of 5. We have one more coming up tomorrow evening, as well as a week from tomorrow, April 29th. The purpose this evening is to engage budget review considerations for the Department of Public Works, consisting of several sections, including administration, highways and streets, buildings and grounds, parks, sanitation, stormwater utility, water and sewer. In addition, a brief review of the city engineer's budget as well. So for that reason, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Director of Public Works, Mike Mason, as well as members of his team to accompany him, various section administrators in the Department of Public Works to help respond to any thoughts or questions relative to the Department of Public Works and all sections they're in. So the first consideration this evening having to do with the administration section, consisting of the Office of the Director of Public Works, Mike Mason, and other related activities. So perhaps the most straightforward item in the category. So with that, administration, again, a very small, the smallest section of the budgets in the Department of Public Works. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are in position to entertain any specific questions or observations you might have. And of course, Director of Public Works, Mike Mason, is in position to join us and discuss as well. Please.
Good evening, Mr. Mason. How are you?
Doing well, Mayor. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, hanging in there.
City Manager, Thea.
All right, Mike.
I had a couple of questions. Let's see, we're on page 5 of the digital version. Looks like line 53, 5680. See, the request for tires has been cut in half. Are we just going to get 2 tires, or we're getting used tires? I mean, how does that work? I mean, from a practical perspective.
Well, typically, the admin budget consists of 25%.
Okay.
The other 75% is made up through water and sewer and sanitation. So, given the condition of the tires that's on the vehicle now, I think that I would be okay with cutting that in half at this time.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question about contractual services. You had 50,000 down, and then all of a sudden it's been cut to 0. Was that something that we need to do, or we need to take off, or what was that?
No, that was part of new public works facility as far as design of a new building. Okay. And that's a discussion that I think, given the direction from city manager, that we'll probably have at a later date.
In other words, ladies and gentlemen, it's not necessary or fiduciarily appropriate to come up with a separate design budget until the actual project is financed, because a design line item or a design budget is part of an overall project. So when a project is financed, say, for example, $1 million to build a building, it may cost $75,000 to $100,000 for design activities and engineering. It's part of that overall budget. Initially, it was contemplated by Public Works to only have an individual design line item without having a project at first. So as direction is facilitated to engage considerations for a new building, it will become part of that overall budget. The design function would become part of that overall budget, which is typically the case in project management and administration. Any other questions regarding administration section?
Not for me.
Not for me. That was it.
Okay, Mayor Motley Broom.
I'm good. I had some questions. Let's see. Actually, it's not the actual budget. It's Exhibit 1, the budget performance. That we're providing leadership and support to the community. This is page 15 of 188, and 16 as well. The data that's supporting the 100% achievement of the goals of the performance measures.
Yes, ma'am.
How are we ensuring that we actually are hitting 100% on that, on those various metrics?
Give me one moment to get to that. We're quantified by the number of complaints that come in and the timely manner that we move forward with addressing those complaints. No matter if it's dealing with any of the divisions that we look at, the phone calls that come through the administration office and then get filtered out to staff. Our goal is to make sure that if there is an issue within the city that we respond within 24 hours. So we track that as far as the complaints come in and giving feedback the same way that we would do in the weekly deficiency reports that we submit to the city manager's office is showing that we are being active and responding to complaints within the community.
So we did it at 100% for, I mean, actually, like, we are at 100% level of responding within 24 hours or less.
Yeah, most of the calls that we have, well, matter of fact, all the calls that we have come in, we have responded in some shape. We might not have resolved it, but we did go out and either made contact with the customer or had to schedule work at a later date, but we did give that initial 24-hour response.
Okay.
I'm not saying we corrected the issue within 24 hours, but we at least gave a response back.
Is there a way for us to understand how long it takes to resolution of an issue? Are you measuring that as well? And I recognize that you do, your department does a number of things. You know, if someone says, I've got yard waste in front of the curb, that's a much easier fix than there's a structural issue going on with a failure in a street that's going into the back of my yard. So it's certainly going to take different amounts of time to reflect resolution on matters. But are we looking at that? And if so, what's the data on that?
No, those particular cases, the answer would be no, because like you just mentioned, it depends on the issue at hand, that it may take us a little bit longer process to get done, whether we got to do an RFP, whether we bring it before mayor and council for approval, depending on the dollar amount. If it's within the city manager's authorization, then we can move much quicker than we would if it goes above that. So I don't have any data to support that, other than whatever came to us. We follow those purchasing policies to get things done.
I think though, when we install the app that we approved at council meeting last night, the click it, see it, and fix it, or I can't remember the name now.
I think we use the one with QSense, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
That should enable us to track all the way through completion.
That's correct, sir. So with the implementation of I'm sorry, Mayor, please.
I said excellent point. And I'm glad that Councilman Clay, at least you're connecting one day with the next. I'll get there.
And I was about to mention that, so the capabilities to expand the reviews and performance connectivity as noted will be enhanced by the result of last evening's authorization. So we're looking forward to being able to enhance our See Something, Say Something program, as well as performance measurements as a result of that opportunity. So that was a good move, I believe, on part of City Council, the mayor, and city administration last evening.
Do we have a time frame on that?
So we will be unveiling that over the next several weeks, actually, given last night's authorization. And as Michael had talked about, Councilman Allen, last evening, it will be custom for the city of College Park to accomplish exactly what we just talked about in terms of performance measurements, tracking, et cetera. So within the next few weeks, we'll be introducing that mechanism.
That'd be good to promote that out and have some citizens there and you know, responding and answering. That would be a good promotion, you know, for the program, I think.
Yes, sir. And as a matter of fact, as part of our executive team meeting tomorrow, myself and the department directors will be able to discuss that specific direction as part of our review of last evening's meeting, which is pretty much the predominance of an executive team meeting on Wednesdays anyhow. So on that note, Councilman Allen and ladies and gentlemen, will do. And we look forward to having a good experience as a result.
Agreed.
Any other questions or observations for administration? Councilman Gay, you okay, sir?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
I said I don't have anything else.
Very well. If nothing further on administration, the next section in the Department of Public Works would be highways and streets. Highways and streets, of course, consisting of 10 staff members. And we are likewise in position to address any specific concerns or observations you all might have with respect to the 2020-2021 proposal.
I had a question on the salary and operations. It shows that the 2020 actual amount is 189,879, and you know, you expect it to be 350. Did we not have a person in place at that, you know, part of the year, or?
Yes, Mike, when the time this report was ran, I believe you had 2 vacancies. Am I
That is
correct? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
The reductions further down the page for repair and maintenance of streets, curbs and sidewalks. Again, we're losing out on some tire money, and then street resurfacing. I've got all 4 of those highlighted. Can you talk a little bit about what went into those reductions? And
It was related to the request of the dollar amount that we needed to reduce.
okay,
So, and looking at the budget, we've made cuts where we otherwise, painful cuts at that, in areas that hopefully once economy comes back, we'll be able to make some budget adjustments to increase some of these line items to get certain projects done that we were looking at doing.
Madam Mayor, Mike, if I may, I'd like to discuss the street resurfacing program to offer a little clarification. So what was initially contemplated was for city administration to expand the street resurfacing program above and beyond what had been the case over previous years. So we looked at allocating at about $500,000 to go above and beyond the local maintenance improvement program and other opportunities for street resurfacing. And essentially we were planning to do more than what we actually do on an annual basis. So we are still working to secure funding from the local maintenance improvement program with the state of Georgia and other resources to implement street resurfacing. But again, it was our hope when the economy was strong before the COVID-19 impacts that we would have that ability above and beyond. And because that's where we are, it was decided to not proceed in this regard in that time. Again, we were simply hoping to expand the street resurfacing effort to benefit the community that much greater, but we'll more than likely simply stick with the local maintenance improvement program opportunities to continue street resurfacing in that fashion for 2020, 2021.
Okay.
And with that, that'll leave, again, maybe possible budget adjustment to make the matching funds that the city must match to receive those funds. So right now we don't have that, but we'll work that out as we move through the year, the fiscal year.
so what you're saying is that even if we got LMIG funds, we couldn't really, I mean, the way that this is structured right now, we don't have anything to match, so we couldn't actually accept them?
Yeah, the city is responsible for a 30% match to contribute towards a paving project with the local maintenance improvement grant program. And but given the fact of where we are, we can look at actually paving this time next year, given where we are in our 2021 budget. So we can look at that time, and if the economy approves, which I think we all anticipating, we'll be able to meet that goal of that match.
Mr. Mason, approximately how much have we gotten from the LMIGs in the, on a yearly basis?
Well, it's been increasing every year. So we've been receiving, I think this last one, we received 174,000. So each year has been going up at different increments, dollar amounts.
So we need about 60,000 to match that.
52,200 to match that. And however, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to caution you, given the current state of economic affairs, that dollar amount may be downward. We are receiving intelligence from the Georgia Department of Transportation that that allocation may be reduced because of the respective financial concerns. So it's technically not as possible to budget a 30% match based on that dollar amount. We just don't know what that will be as of yet. That's the recommendation, to accept that outcome and we make a budget adjustment regarding the match. So at the maximum, if it came in at that $174,000 and change threshold, we're talking about a matching contribution of about $52,200. But again, forecasts are actually downward. Exactly what that will be remains to be seen. But again, those considerations won't be born until the early part of 2020-21.
Mr. Mason, how approximately how much of those LMIG dollars do you use in the first half of the fiscal year?
Typically, it varies because we've just completed one project last fall. So, and that was the Herschel Road paving project from Washington Road to Camp Creek Parkway. So technically, the new set of money that they said that was awarded to the city, we can pave, either this spring that we could look at, or into, like I mentioned before, in the spring of 2021. Whether we did it this spring, through the summer, through the fall. Typically, to answer your question, Mayor, to be quite honest, we pay usually in the fall. And if we don't do that then it kicks back over to the 2021 fiscal year.
I want to make sure that we're able to be poised to at least be able to receive funding in this, on this level. Like, I understand that we're not capable of putting out above and, funding above and beyond. But I mean, I apologize.
I think, Mayor, to answer your concern is that we will keep an eye on that to make sure the city does not lose any funding from the state. So if there is a case where we have to move on a project, we will bring that recommendation to the city manager office to make him aware that there's a potential that we may lose these funds if we don't do a paving project. But we have typically, I have paved in the fall, latter part of the year, meaning sometime around August, September, even in October. And I also have done projects the following year, which would be 2021. So I think we should be okay.
Okay. All right.
When you say street resurfacing, are you talking about a whole street or part of a street, or what are we talking about here?
We're talking about the entire street, depending on the amount of funding that we have. Mm-hmm. So what actual paving projects get done all depends on funding. When we put out the RFP on the selected streets, as we get that dollar amount back from the vendors, that'll determine how much paving projects we will be able to complete.
But I mean, if you had a small project that's 200 feet, say something like that, that's not considered in here as a street resurfacing, I guess.
Yeah, it would be. It could be. If not capital, if it's 200 feet, we'll probably look at it in our street, R&M streets.
Okay.
If we had to do a smaller project.
Okay.
Mike, to follow up on Ken's question, we have a policy now that if we do extensive sewer work on a street, that instead of patching it, we will repave it, that area that we've worked on. Are we still able to do that with this budget?
Yes, but
Okay.
that would, if we did that type of work, we'd probably be looking at it, included it in, say if it's a water line or sewer line, it would be paid for out of the water and sewer budget.
Right,
Part of that
right,
overall project.
right. I just wanted to clarify that, because that's why you do 200 feet, Ken,
Okay, yeah, I was just, yeah.
typically.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Any other thoughts or observations regarding highways and streets, ladies and gentlemen?
Nope.
I see road signs over here, road signs and delineators. You had 20,000, and then all of a sudden, it looks like there's a lot of zeros. Is again that trying to meet the budget? Is that?
Yeah, I think that what happened is on that is, and I'll just bring that up, we will have to do probably a budget transfer, take money out of another account, because there is no way we're going to be able to go the entire year with no funding for roadway signs, street signs, or any other signs that get requests that comes to the department. So we try to meet that goal, but I think that's not realistic for us. So we may have to move some money around without increasing the budget as it is today.
I mean, that entire materials and supplies category has pretty much been zeroed out.
Yes.
And my question was just what you seem to state. How realistic is that?
It's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough, to be quite honest. And you know, I guess we're trying to meet the cuts that was requested out of this particular budget. That some hard decisions was made, Mayor, really, some very hard.
However, if I may, ladies and gentlemen, if I may, please. So the beauty of the Department of Public Works is that you have multiple sections and the ability to engage in the interdepartmental budget adjustment to take care of some of these concerns that's more so available because of the related enterprise operations therein. So that's essentially what we talked about in terms of coming up with a balanced budget recommendation. So the zeros exist for purposes of achieving a balanced budget recommendation. However, there does exist the ability to engage in the departmental or intra-departmental budget adjustment to cover those expenses once they are clearly defined in terms of needs. In other words, when we finalized the proposed budget consideration, we were still working to outline what we think the needs would be specific to that effect for 2020, 2020, 2021. So for that reason, that would be the way to go, given this juncture, similar to the previous discussion we just had.
I expect you're going to have a bunch of money you're going to end up moving around on a lot of these line items.
You will, Councilman Clay, that's correct. But again, given where we are, but again, the beauty of it is within that department, the various sections provides that flexibility. So that's what's great about it. And that's what we've all discussed while preparing the final series of recommendations.
It'll be tough.
But we'll work it through, Mike. We always do.
I'm still a little confused about, I mean, if we're cutting across the board, how this money gets moved. And I understand that we have a, I understand that we have, our constraints. I also want us to be looking at this as pragmatically as possible. And it's hard for me. I mean, I think that Councilman Allen's attention to the road signs and delineators line item is key. I mean, when I looked at this materials and supplies overall, I thought, well, we've got to be shifting this somewhere else in the department. It's sort of taking on this responsibility. And I especially going through this for the first time, it's like I want to see numbers that are as accurate as possible. And if we're just going to move it around later, it makes it difficult for me to have an appreciation of what we're really evaluating. That being said, we can move on.
Any other questions or observations for highways and streets? Councilman Taylor has joined us. I'd like to recognize him. Councilman Taylor is with us now. You're on mute, sir. Come off mute.
Yes, I'm here. I apologize for being late, but thank you guys
Thank you.
so far.
So we took care of administration and highways and streets for the Department of Public Works. I would like to ask if you had any questions at all, sir, thus far.
No, sir.
Okay, very well. Councilman Gay, you okay?
Fine.
All right. Mayor, Ken Allen, Councilman Clay, I believe the three of you all stated that you were okay, correct?
Correct.
The next section is buildings and grounds. Again, and
I've got a question, Terrence, on building and grounds on the page 44, which is the actual head count in that area. In the 2019-2020 column, you're showing a bottom line total of 19 with 3 people in part-time locations. And you move to the department head requested budget, and they're all the same except for the number of part-time positions, and that increases by 1, but the total is increasing by 2.
That's
So
clearly
is
an error.
this an arithmetic error?
Yes, sir.
it is.
That's clearly
Okay,
an error.
so now my next question is, so you're adding 1 part-time position, is that correct?
That was
Well,
an initial,
yeah.
Go ahead, Mike, please.
No, that's what we were looking at, adding 1 additional person as part of the litter cleanup throughout the city as a part-time position.
Right.
So yes, sir, to your point.
So
Okay.
right now that position is not funded, however, correct? Mike and Theo?
Yes, that is
We
correct.
initially prepared the budget. We contemplated an additional part-time litter individual. So that's no longer the case. So the number of positions between part-time and full-time will remain at 19, correct?
That is correct.
It's a
Okay,
rhetorical question, but yeah.
well, the arithmetic is wrong. So they won't remain at 19, they'll remain at 20, I believe. That column 2019-20 should be a total, I believe, of 20.
I think so too.
No,
For 16 and 3. No, it says 19, but one of them is off because there's no difference between the 2 columns except for part-time position. 2,
yeah, that part-time should be
8, 9, 3,
remain at
12,
3.
4, 16, 4, 20. The last 2 columns are wrong. They are supposed to be 20 instead of 21.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, guys, I've got another suggestion.
Sure.
We're going to have problems with people being able to pay their utility bill. We talked about that last night. I'd like the council to consider that we allow people who want to work off their utility bill the possibility of doing things like litter pickup. And we would pay them what we pay the other employees, minimum wage, $15 an hour. And you could do that in lieu of hiring a part-time employee. Now, keep in mind, we talked at one time, I remember when we were talking about bringing in part-time employees or temporary employees to mow grass and what have you like that. And there was a lot of concern about insurance coverage and operating the equipment and getting hurt possibly on the equipment or damaging the equipment. But litter pickup is something that's pretty straightforward. And I think we ought to consider it. I'm not saying to make a decision now. I'm just saying that's another thing in our bag of tricks to try to address both our expenses and our need in the community.
Do we need to say that part of that money or all of the money or part of it, a percentage needs to go to help pay off that? Do you need to set that
Well,
criteria?
no, I'm saying you pay them
do whatever they
$15
want
an
to.
hour to work off their debt. They're not getting extra money in their pocket. They are getting the fact that they don't have to pay it off on their power bill.
Right, we would take it off their power bill rather than giving them $15 an hour and they go out and buy groceries. So we would have to set it.
Yeah, well, you can buy groceries with the money that you don't pay us for the power bill.
You're right.
So something to consider and evaluate from a liability standpoint and that, so there's some points that we would need to consider. So
Yep, I
perhaps-
think that's a definite point of consideration.
yes, so.
But there are other jobs in the city that probably have even less liability. For example, we've talked about people to man the security cameras. I have to do a background check on them. I wanted to use people from the police academy for that job, graduates of the police academy, because they have a background check. But that's another possibility, that you could use citizens, responsible background check citizens, to help pay off their expenses that way. I'm just saying, guys, we got to get everybody involved in this situation. So that's all I have.
Yeah.
On that one, I've got more later.
I've got a question on, and it's just a question. It says on 526170, street row canopy trimming. It's a new program start. Can you tell me a little bit about that program? Because I don't think
Yes,
I know.
sir. Over a period of time, a lot of trees in the community are starting to overgrow. And we were looking at starting a program where we go out and cut back the canopy from overhanging the roadway, sort of doing a little cleaning up, as far as aesthetics in the neighborhoods and eliminate some of that vegetation that's overgrown over the years. So that basically was the program we were looking at.
Okay, just didn't know anything about it. Okay.
I've got a question. I think it's on page 1 of 3. I think it's, I just wanted to comment that you made a reduction on the tires, a significant reduction, but I think that's the kind of thing you have to do. You still have money left in there. I remember the mayor's concern about having nothing in there, or virtually nothing in there. But at least in this particular case, you've left some money in there. And I think that's the kind of thing you need to do, as long as you don't go too deep. We don't want people driving on bald tires.
No,
It's
not
not
at
help
all.
our employees, and it's not going to help our vehicles if they have an accident. But those kinds of things are things you can work on.
I agree with the mayor. When you have zero in there, it doesn't really give you any kind of idea, what you're looking at. If we had some kind of a number, that would be a little bit better. But
Yeah.
hard for me
I
to
agree.
understand the zero, I guess. But and again, I know the cuts are just really, really tough, and I appreciate the job you're doing, Mr. Mason.
That 6170 line, if you weren't doing that new program, you would be able to come out at 33K roughly, which would be the cost of the existing program. I think you had a couple line items in there.
Yes, sir. That was the ball field mowing and the detention pond
Right.
mowing. Yes, sir.
Now, we're going to get to a point where we can't do everything we'd like to do. And the tree trimming, for example, do we really need to do all that overhanging tree trimming?
Actually, there's no funds available for that. That's what we cut out.
So we're talking 526170 contractual services.
Yes, sir. That's strictly the detention ponds and the ball field mowing.
Well, then why not let the detention ponds grass grow a little bit higher? I'm just saying that there are areas where you can't come back. For example, if you're trying to be economical on stationery, for example, well, you want to not throw it away, but you're going to have to do a certain amount of printing. But grass, if it grows 2 feet high before you cut it instead of 1 foot, that's something that, yeah, people are going to look and say, well, I'm not happy the grass is growing. Yep, but we're still picking up your garbage. I'm just saying those are the kind of cut areas where when push comes to shove, and it's going to come, that's what we're going to have to work on. I think we need to keep some of those items, maybe a list of areas where we could cut back more and it wouldn't hurt safety. It makes the city look seedier, but it's better than a lot of other alternatives.
It's better than laying off people.
That's exactly what I had in mind.
Well, Councilman, we can look at that. A lot of the several of the detention ponds areas, either we maintain them, or if they get overgrown, it's going to cost the city more because it's involving additional man hours to mow once it gets up above a certain height. Right now, we mowing them at 6 inches. I think that's where we're looking at as far as mowing. So you get any higher than that.
Okay, Mike, I don't want you to make a dumb decision that's a bad economic trade-off. The name of the game is to try to save money. I'm just trying to throw out an example of something that perhaps logically you could cut down. Now, if you're cutting it at 6 inches, maybe you were cutting it at 3 inches. Well, then cut it at 6 inches and you don't need a different mower. I'm saying we ought to be making a list of things where you can cut back. And yes, it's not as nice, but it isn't going to be life-threatening or change the lifestyle of people. It just doesn't look as good. And I hate things not looking as good, but I'd rather not lay off people to make them look good.
So items for deferred maintenance, if you will.
Yes, ma'am.
Defer that maintenance a little while longer if possible.
You betcha.
Got it.
I'm going back to the previous page, but on was 52, 57, 80 the ball fields and detention? Was that the 55,000 you requested down to 8?
That was tires. The tires with.
No, that's above that. It's grounds. 52, 57, 80 she's referring to.
Okay, mulching and trees, so beautification stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
That was a particular project we had that we were looking at doing before this pandemic mess hit, involving the beautification at Lee Street and Main Street. As people enter our city coming off of I-85 from the airport and coming into the downtown area, right there by CSX railroad tracks. That was the project that we end up cutting, is try to beautify that intersection, that whole both hillsides.
Yeah, I apologize. I think I said it was tires. It was actually grounds.
Right.
So we've spent about $15,000. 17 actually is much less than 2019. Okay.
Well, we're at 87%. and we should be at 3/4. So if you take 15,000 and add 5,000 onto it, that'd be about 20,000.
Right. I was looking at what we actually spent in 2019.
Oh, yeah.
But Councilman Gay, I know this is a something close to your heart.
Well, thank you for noticing that. I had talked about it earlier, but in lieu of all of the other cuts. However, my bigger issue, and this can be discussed at another date, I think we need to do a better job in negotiating some of the spending we're doing with these much larger projects. I mean, it's unconscionable to give somebody $450,000 and don't even ask them, don't even negotiate with them, and then spend $8,000 to beautify your entire city. I mean, that's just not even in my comprehension. But you know, the only reason why it went up to 17 is because the council and mayor last year agreed to bring it up a bit. And Michael, this wasn't just those 3 projects. That according to Jason was for the entire city, all different right-of-way projects. That was no special project. That was him just trying to tell you that that's just not adequate for a city of 15 square miles to spend $8,000 on an entire city.
I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mason, I think his requested amount for 2021 included a bigger project.
Yes, that is correct.
Right, the 55,500 that he
The
requested.
additional, yeah, that is correct.
He wasn't saying that the 17.5 for the 2020 fiscal year was for special projects.
No, that was citywide.
And so it's the 55 was citywide, correct, Michael? I just got off the phone with him before the meeting. It was citywide.
Well, I don't know, not the funds that we had. If you go look at transactions, we had, well, Jason here right now. So I'll let Jason bring clarity to the conversation you two had. Jason?
Yes. I had 4 projects listed still in there. They were listed the citywide, the 40,000 something we cut out of there, 50,000 we cut out of there was for the particular street at Lee and Main Street. For the beautification there, that was the big project that we cut out. And I cut down the area of scope for these other projects that they're listed on the transaction report under 52, 57, 80 grounds. There were a couple of those we did cut out of there, but these are pretty much citywide here that you're speaking of.
Remaining funds, and including the additional funds that we received last year was for citywide and maintenance of our existing flower beds and so forth.
So the scope of these projects did scale down.
I would recommend that we move on, because that's, I mean, I'm just saying that's on us to not understand that is just as important as anything else that in this entire budget. But I would recommend we just move on and do with what's been put here.
Fair enough. I just wanted to reach out to you because I know this is something that you care about deeply, and I just want to make sure you were heard.
Well, anybody who go to anybody's city and admire a beautiful city, I think everybody ought to care about, beautification. One of the biggest things that I did as a 15-year national recognized landscaper was compare Black communities or lower communities, landscape, beautification, streetscapes with other cities. And I say that respectfully in that a lot has to do with education and appreciation. If you go down Rugby, if you look at, say, someone's home who has landscaping that's commensurate to the cost of their house. If somebody got a $700,000 house and they got a 20% is in their yard, the yard complements the house. But if you look at somebody with a, house in their yard doesn't have anything in it, just anybody, can appreciate the difference. So if you want the city to look the way that you marking it on paper, you got to pay for that. And I just don't see how you do that with $8,000. But that can come in time. That'll come in time.
Fair enough. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I just have one more comment, and it's just a comment. 52,6,200. We've cut the training down to 500, and you know, I don't want us to cut out a lot of the training. I think it's very, very important that our people have the training that they need. So just keep that in mind.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments or observations for buildings and grounds?
We're not doing any repair and maintenance on the park buildings. That is 52, 57, 41, page 1 of 3. It doesn't look like we've spent a ton of it in the current fiscal year. Is there a particular reason we didn't? Like we spent almost $15,000 in 2019 and then less than $400 so far this year.
Could you repeat that account number, Mayor, for
52,
me?
57, 41.
52, 57, 41. Yeah, that was related to some building repairs at Public Works that we had funded. I had funds allocated for that.
Okay, so we're not anticipating that we're going to have any problems with the building itself? Or, I mean, is that, it doesn't look like you've had any problems this year or any significant.
Yes.
Not at this time. Not at this time, Mayor.
Anytime that I see zeros, I'm probably going to ask. So I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yes, towards the roof here.
Yeah, well, again, that's one of those hard line items that we've got zeroed out. That money was used for, I think we had a pole barn repair that we're looking at, and whatever maintenance that we needed to perform related to the gas pumps.
Okay.
Any other observations for buildings and grounds, ladies and gentlemen?
Nope.
Good, thank you.
Very well. Councilman Gay, you okay? Councilman Taylor, you okay?
Is he gonna replace the truck 166 with the, is that on there? Truck 166, he's gonna replace that? He had I think you cut that out.
Yeah, that was cut out as well.
Does he need a truck?
Yep.
We'll continue with the vehicles we have in position for one more year.
Do we know what the maintenance cost is on that truck? Has been on that truck?
$4,200. $4,200.
4,200.
Yes, sir.
And a new truck would cost you what, 50, 60,000?
No, 30. I believe. 30.
A little over 30, 35.
A little over 30. Well, that's something you might want to push off, yeah.
Yeah. Councilman Taylor, did you have anything further, sir?
No, I'm good.
Okay, very well. The next section would be the parks section of the Department of Public Works. Two positions, a laborer 1 and a laborer 2. Any questions or concerns?
I didn't have any.
Nope.
Nope, I didn't have any.
Councilman Taylor?
No, I don't.
Councilman Gay?
I don't have any.
Okay, Councilman Allen, I misunderstood you, sir. You okay?
Well, I didn't have one. Let me just recreation capital projects, 100,000. That's 547920.
What page?
On the hard copy 202.
Oh,
That's a long way back.
We in,
$1,000 consideration, Mike, if you wish to discuss that, please.
I was going to defer to you because I don't know where that figure came from.
I believe, yeah, I'm gonna need your help on this one.
Terrence, you requested that we add that $100,000 for a city.
Okay, I know what it is now, yeah. So that's actually a matching contribution in the event of the Community Development Block Grant Program comes to fruition for various park enhancements. So what we're talking about are several hundreds of thousands of dollars becoming available from the Community Development Block Grant Program for parks enhancements to be determined by Mayor and City Council as we go forward. There's been a great deal of discussion back and forth to that effect. And given the fact that the Fulton County program is making funding available in that regard, it seemed prudent to make a match contribution available based on what's anticipated to happen.
But
So-
you don't have a line item in there for a match.
That would be that, yes.
That is the match.
Yes, so the anticipated outcome as calculated, as revealed by the Fulton County Department of Community Development is anticipated to be $400,000, and the matching contribution is 25%. So we did include resources to help us get to that place.
What line item in the budget worksheet is that? What page is that on? I didn't see it in there.
Remember seeing that? Oh, it's
I've got it on.
547920, page 67 of 180.
Yes,
Okay, 7920 on page 2 of 2.
Yes.
Correct.
that's the last item in the workshop, or the budget transaction report, the backup,
Okay, and you think that might be a 30% match?
25%. 25 to
25.
30%.
So you're talking about getting $300,000. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So why would we budget for that and not budget for LMEG?
Because we know what the CDBG outcome will be. We did the math. We've been in touch with them specifically, whereas LMAG has not been able to reveal what's going to become possible. And I get that because the Community Development Block Grant Program is a straight allocation from the federal government to the Fulton County Urban Entitlement Program. So the math is pretty straightforward. Whereas the LMAG, it remains to be seen. Otherwise, we would do the same.
Has there ever been a time when we've gotten zero in LMIG?
No.
No, we've always gotten something. But this time it's a bit precarious because it's hard to forecast until they reveal where we are. CDBG revealed what would become possible, whereas the Georgia Department of Transportation weren't able to when we inquired.
Unless there was a change.
I mean, I understand that, we don't want to, I mean, it's just going to cause us to come back and have separate discussions. Like, I mean, what were they doing back in, at the depths of the last recession? I mean, I feel like there's some way that we can take a look at past data to give us an educated understanding of what is possible now with LMIG.
They gave us the funding. We always receive the funding.
Right. I mean, I'm just talking about in terms of funding levels that, even in economic downturns, we're getting something. So I mean, we're going to all have to have this discussion again because we haven't planned for LMIG at all, but we know we're going to get something. And right now we are not anticipating our 30% at any point.
Well, Mayor, if you want to get those numbers, go back to the days of the recession. Go back to what, 2009, 2010, 2011, those timeframes, and see what we got back then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a That's probably the depths of our LMIG funding.
Right. So that would be a conservative estimate.
Right.
Any other observations? For parks?
Nothing for me.
If not, sanitation, which is a pretty robust operation. Sanitation presently consisting of 29 staff members, so 29 positions.
Yeah, I've got some questions again on the org chart, personnel account. We've got, you put in, Mike, you put in for 34. You're getting 29. And are you still down 3 drivers?
Yes, yes, sir. That is correct.
But those positions are in here, they're just not filled, is that correct?
That is correct.
I thought
So-
those drivers were, I thought those drivers' positions were just waiting on background checks, 2 of them.
Yeah, that is true. Still waiting.
I
But they're
thought,
not filled, they're not working, is correct?
Yeah, that is correct. It's not filled. Position still vacant.
I'm a
Well,
little
I think
confused. So we have candidates we've selected. They're undergoing background checks. And how long has this process been taking?
A long time,
over 2 months.
Why?
at least. I think it was partially related to the turnover that we've experienced in the HR department. I reached out to Chris and we had dialogue in regards to that just in the latter part of last week as a follow-up. And he is in the process of checking with PD to find out what has been the holdup on the background checks.
Because we're suffering without those drivers. There's a lot of trash that hasn't been picked up, lawn debris and so forth, and other issues.
Mike Mason, is ultimately the director's responsibility to work closely with both police and the Department of Human Resources and Risk Management to shepherd the continuation of a selection process.
Excuse me?
No,
I did my responsibility as I've done historically, and I've reached out multiple times to move this process along. And that's why I said my last follow-up that I had with Mr. Cook was just latter part of last week, and we moving forward. I don't know, what's transpiring in other departments. All I know is what we've done and what we continue to follow up and do.
Let me ask a dumb
That's what I'm
question,
saying.
Mike, let me ask a dumb question. If you can't get what you want from the other departments, can you bypass them? Can you
No.
go directly to any source? Is there a private firm that does background checks that you can solicit?
I
Hey,
can look
I just want to
into it.
get the job done.
Well,
So
Absolutely.
if it's broken somewhere else and we can't fix it, or they can't fix it, then bypass them.
Because once you get done with background check, the next phase will be drug screening, which is handled through our HR department. Once we get the background checks back, and that will be the next process. In other words, next phase, Councilman.
Well, I tell you what I would do and what I used to do, just go ahead and bypass them. And then on top of it, put the charges back against their department to get it done.
My question is, are these people still available?
That's a good question, Councilman Allen.
You wait long
Yes.
enough, they won't be.
Yes, I'm being reported that yes, they are still waiting.
Well, I sent an email to everybody 2 weeks ago, if it helps. So Mike is right. He did whatever he could do. I reached out. As a school teacher, they sub out background checks now. It's not like at schools no more. You can do it now. There's agencies where the employees can go and get it done. 30 minutes is done. I can give
That's
you
my point, Roderick. That's my
We
point.
can do it at Delta, and we can do it back in the day.
So ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do, Mike, at the conclusion of tomorrow's executive team meeting, let's have a word with the respective departments so that we can make sure that everything is getting squared away. I understand it's several weeks that typically is appropriate for the necessary criminal background checks, the drug screening, and those types of activities. That's very commonplace, but we should not have any lengthy activity associated therein. It's generally pretty straightforward. So I'd like to spend a few moments with you tomorrow to work with everybody else involved to get to the bottom of that. If there's a impediment, a glitch in some process internally, that needs to be remedied. Otherwise, I'm not aware of any concerns specifically until now.
Will do.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm trying to understand. Do we have a hiring freeze or not? I don't understand what we're talking about.
We have a hiring freeze, Councilman Taylor. However, these were positions that were actually recruited well in advance of the hiring freeze, so it was not impacted in that regard. Plus, it relates directly to service provisions based on an enterprise fund. Having the positions help us make money on that particular section. So for that reason, we need to continue moving forward. Sanitation is an enterprise fund. Those position vacancies need to be filled in order to satisfy the revenue outcomes.
It'll pay for itself.
Correct.
Okay, so we got the same situation in the water department. So we gonna do the exact same thing there. Or what are we gonna do there? Same thing. It's no different.
What situation is that? I'm sorry, Councilman.
Like we got vacancies in the water department also, right? That we
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
we gonna do this the same way, right?
I think
There's a difference that when you have a handful of truck drivers. How many truck drivers do you have, Mike?
Total, it was three vacancies right now.
No, I know you have 3 vacancies, but if you had a full complement of drivers, how many would you have? It looks like on
11 drivers. Yes, sir.
11. And I'm getting a constant string of complaints from people that contact me and I pass them on that say, and you know, I've sent some of them to you, that they're not getting things picked up in front of their yard. We're probably paying overtime, having people work on Saturdays and Sundays, I think sometimes.
Yes.
We need, there are certain critical positions that you already got in the hopper that if they aren't filled, nothing else happens. I mean, you can't have the guys working a truck if the truck isn't driven. So anyhow, I understand what Councilman Taylor is saying. We got to treat people with some degree of equity across the whole organization, but there are some positions that are absolutely critical, and these were in the hopper before. They've been in the hopper for months.
Well,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We got the same situation. It's the same department because they all up on the public works, and just in sanitation, I guess we get more calls, but they in the same situation in the water department with less people. You understand what I'm saying? So we gonna continue to hire in one area. We need to do it in the same area because they weak in both areas.
What are these positions?
Superintendent and supervisor in water and sewer.
Those are management positions.
Wait, hold on a second though. I understand that the positions are open, but I in listening to what Mr. Mason was saying, these people have actually been selected to fill these positions and were selected to fill these positions back in February. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Has anyone been selected to fill these other positions that we're talking about?
Not at this time.
That's the distinction that I see, that we've already have people who have been identified and are in the process of it.
Right. Good distinction, Mayor.
I got still. So we don't have nobody in the water department selected already for these positions. That's what I'm hearing.
That is correct. And we went through a first round of interviews with the internal candidates, and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah, that's the problem with management candidates. It's going to take longer to fill those positions. Yep.
Are the
Oh,
ones
yeah.
with water, are they all management positions?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, I think we've pretty well beaten this to death.
Okay.
I'm almost sorry I brought it up.
Otherwise, any other observations or concerns relative to sanitation?
Oh, yeah, I've got plenty.
Please.
Next page.
Page,
Right at the top, this is page 1 of 4 and page 83 on the actual total copy. Right near the top of the page, there's sales to residential customers and sales to commercial customers. And we're showing that we reduced it 12%.
Yep.
Now, if we look at the 2020 amended budget, well, if you actually go back to the 2019 actual amount, it was almost 1.3 million, or about 1.3 million. And you cut it down to 1.1 million. The actual at this point in 2020 is a little over $1 million. And you're at 75%. So you could figure you could add, if things were linear, you could add on $1/3 on top of that. And you're coming in at 1.1. So definitely you came down. But do we really believe that with all these utility bills that we talked about last night that aren't getting paid, that we are only going to see a 12% reduction in residential? And then you've got commercial, and there were a lot of commercials that were behind. And there we took a 13% deduction. So my contention is that isn't nearly enough that we're down. You've got sales to the convention center on there that show an 82% increase. Now, I presume that sales to convention center probably includes the arena. Maybe it doesn't. But you're carrying away the garbage. Well, if you don't have any clients, you're not going to have any garbage. So how in heaven's name could we see an 82% increase to $50,000 there, when I would expect we'd see a very significant decrease. And then other city sales, I'm not sure what all is in there, but it seems to me that that is unlikely to go up 9%. I would think it would be also coming down. So what do you have to say?
On that particular line item, I'm gonna ask Thea to speak on that.
When you're looking at the percentage column, is comparing the proposed budget to the 2020 amended. So if you look at the proposed budget, it was initially 27,000. In the prior year, it was 50,747. And actual to date is 39,000. So that 82% is a little deceiving because it's only comparing the amended budget to the proposed budget. But yeah, but I do hear what you're saying, because the arena is now closed and they're not using as much water. So
we're not talking water, we're talking about sanitation.
Well, sanitation, I'm sorry, sanitation, as far as not basically putting out any trash, no business is going on at this moment. So that number can be adjusted.
Okay, here's my point. Let's take that specific line, sales to the convention center. I can say the same thing about all three lines, but the sales to the convention center, the actual amount to date spent, well, when this report was won, which was what, the end of March, I believe.
Correct.
You were at $39,000.
Correct.
And we are currently projecting that next year, and now if you take $39,000, hold on a minute, take $39,000, take a third of that, that's 13,000 roughly. So you add 13 onto 39 or 13 onto 40, you're up to 49 and 50. So you project out at 50. So
Yeah.
so if things were normal, I'd say I wouldn't even be looking at this line item. I'd say 50. But we know the fourth quarter of this year isn't going to be 13. We'll be lucky if it's 5. And then you go into the whole new fiscal year, there is no way that that number is going to come out to be $50,000. It just isn't going to happen, guys. We're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic instead of worrying about the lifeboats. That money isn't there.
I totally agree. I think the revenue that we're expecting the final quarter of this year and the first months or so, or maybe even 6 months of next year, our revenue is going to be way, way off. I got some serious doubts what our revenue is going to be.
And Ken, if you go up the 2 lines higher to residential and commercial customers, people aren't paying their utility bills. And we're going to have to try to get all that back. We've got hotels that are running at, say, 15% occupancy. What kind of trash are they going to generate? I'm sorry. This budget is way over optimistic on revenue.
Well, to commercial customers, do we charge them based on the number of pickups or the amount of waste that they pick up? You know, if we have a schedule that goes through there and we're doing it every single time, you know, is that what you're basing it on, or?
It's based on number of pickups.
Okay. So the number of pickups are not really going to change too much.
Well, they can cut back.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll just cut back on the number of pickups. They'll have one a month maybe.
And get a reduced rate because of that.
I would anticipate that you're already getting feedback in that regard, Mr. Mason.
Yes, ma'am.
So why are we talking about a budget? I mean, we've had a lot of discussion to this point about expenses, small amounts of expenses relatively. And we don't even have the revenue to cover anywhere near any of those expenses. We could set them all to zero, set them all negative. Try to sell some of our supplies back. I'm being a little facetious at this point.
Are you just speaking of sanitation, or are you talking about the whole budget need to be reduced?
Well,
because what are we going to
well,
do?
when we move on, we'll move on to water and sewer, and we'll have issues in water and sewer too.
But isn't it fair to say though, and I can appreciate your concern, but isn't it fair to say that this is a budget? It's a budget. I mean, they mitigate the loss as best as they could. There are substantial cuts here, and it's a budget. This is not, I mean, budgets are made to be changed as you get into the actual year.
Hey, well, here's the problem I have, Councilman Gay, Roderick. We're spending a lot of time, or will spend a lot of time, on small budget cuts, relatively small. And we're ignoring the fact that this is an enterprise fund. It's supposed to pay for itself. If we don't have the revenue in there, and we're going to try to continue even at the reduced cuts that are in here, this fund is not going to make money. It's not going to cover its expenses. It's going to lose money. And if it loses money, the money is going to have to come from somewhere else. And that somewhere else is the general fund. And the general fund gets its money out of taxes. And if we don't have, and other sources, but only about a quarter of it comes from residential taxes, as I remember. So we're going to have to if we try to keep going at the same levels or just a minor reduction in expenses, we're going to have to raise taxes very significantly. So we ought to get squared away on the revenue first. And I know we're not going to get it totally right, but to be talking about a 12% cut if we should have a 25% cut, and then have to go back and redo all the agonizing over, well, are we going to mow the grass 12 feet or 2 feet or 6 feet? Those kind of arguments, we're just going to we're going through a lot more painful arguments. Are we going to be talking about laying off people, for example? And I would rather face up to the hard reality of what we think the revenue is going to be at this point, rather than spending the time making cuts that are going to be totally meaningless. And we'll be revising the budget July 1.
So do you want to right now on the page, do you want to cut these 3 sales revenue right now by 20% and let Althea adjust it? Because you want to cut right now the 3 revenue items by 20%?
What I want to do, what I would like to do, is for all revenue items in all areas of the budget, we take a look at them very seriously first. That's what we tried to do with this budget, but clearly things are worse and appear to get worse than we anticipated. So rather than spending so much energy looking at individual cuts, look at the revenue and see how much money we actually have to work with. I just think it's a better usage of our time.
If we kept going this direction, I don't know enough about finance, but can we play around with the general fund numbers towards the end? Althea?
Oh, we can. Yeah, the big compensating factor is when we set the millage rate. Sure, you can go along with this, and you can say, well, we're going to have to move $5 million out of the general fund to cover all these other things. Don't hang me on that number. I just threw out a number, pulled it out of the air. But my point is, so how do you get $5 million more? Well, you raise the millage rate. That's one way to do it. I don't think our constituents.
That wasn't really what I was saying.
Would like that.
I was saying in terms of, can't we just continue the way we're going? They're making substantial cuts in expenses. Can we just adjust these numbers towards the end and in our larger numbers in our Terrence, you understand? You understand what I'm trying to say?
I do.
Yes.
Can y'all kind of help me out with what I'm trying to say, rather than we just look at each one of these numbers like he's saying, which he's right. Can we not adjust it in our cash in and cash out, something like that?
What you're asking is whether or not we can come back. Basically, what we can do is make the adjustments. If you want us to go across the board as far as the enterprise funds and cut them by 25%, we can do that and make the adjustments and come back and tell you all if he can't make any cuts within his department, what he would need to cover his budget as far as the enterprise funds.
Well,
once I make the additional cut, I will go back to Mike and see if he can make any adjustment without compromising any realistic numbers. And if he can give me what he can, and then I can come back with a number basically stating this is what he's off. If he has reserves, the council can choose to dip into the funds reserve. If he doesn't, he's going to need something from somewhere like the general fund.
Okay, Althea.
Yes, sir.
I don't hang on 25%. I just pulled that number out of the air. It could be 30%. It could be 20%. It could be 40%. I don't know. We don't know. All we can do is, but there are certain things we do know. There are certain things we know what our revenue is. You're in a good position to know how much money is coming in from the hotels. You generated that report, for example. We've got reports that anticipate how long it's going to take for hotels to come back. What I'm trying to get us to do is get a small team of people together, 2 or 3 people, get a Cookie Smoke, get a Mercedes, get a Mike Mason, get the people that have their you Richardson, the people that have their pulse on revenue coming up, sit down and realistically, based on the best information that the various members of the team can contribute, how much is our revenue going to go down? And that's the number we ought to be using in the budget. And it's not going to be perfect. And we may have to make adjustments. Hopefully we'll make adjustments on the good side, as opposed to having to cut more.
I have a dumb question. Why can't we continue to go the way we're going? Then if they look at the enterprise revenue, adjust that in our, what she just said, sir, at the end, not line item by line item, or we need to have them redo all of this.
Yeah, well, that's the concern I had. That's why we delayed the budget meetings in the first place, because we were hoping to have a better feeling for revenue.
If we don't look at revenue, if we don't try to get a handle on revenue, I agree with both of you. We can change it at the later date, but you need to be looking at revenue right now. When you look at the airlines, you look at the other companies, I mean, they just all of a sudden are cutting flights 80% and stuff like that. So we need to be ready. If we're going to look at it this way, we need to be ready to make some real hard cuts. And the longer you wait to make these cuts, the worse it's going to be. So
the deeper you
yeah,
cut,
we can
the longer you wait.
I think the danger that we run into, if we don't have a strong approximation of our revenue based upon all the best heads getting together, is that we come along later and we're surprised because the numbers that we've put in for revenue are falling, double-digit percentages short of our anticipated our anticipated numbers. And so then it becomes, well, we really can't get those tires that we thought, and we're running on bald tires. It becomes an emergency situation, figuring out where this money has to be cut. So I think that this budget exercise and the conversations that we're having give us an opportunity, however painful it is, to really think about how we're going to wrap our heads around this extreme reduction in revenue, especially given, hey, we've got another stimulus package that passed through Congress today, or at least on the Senate side, hasn't gone to the House, but still does not include local governments. Now they say we're going to come around on the fourth one, but we don't have any backup as a city yet. So I think that things may come down the pike, but we have to be cognizant of the fact that, right now, 4 weeks into this, we are close to $700,000 behind on utility collections. I mean, that's not that is a real number. So, which is, I mean, for our last meeting 2 weeks ago, it was somewhere in the $200,000 range. So, I mean, these are real hard decisions that we're going to be facing. And I think the more information we have, the more accurate that information can be, the better.
Yeah, Mayor, I guess it sounds like you and I are somewhat on the same page. I guess what I suggest we do is, as we're going through the budget, not spend a huge amount of time on whether we've cut training by 10% or 5%, or I don't know, any of the funds that we've all been talking about, that we go through and we say, okay, why did you cut that out? Does it make sense or not? No, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I had to take that cut, and flag those line items where we can, where we've got some wiggle room. Like, again, a simple cutting the grass, maybe it's trash pickups. Maybe we only pick up trash once a week. There are areas where we've got some flexibility, and we ought to be identifying those line items as we go through, so that when we do go back, if we have to go back a second time, then we can, we know where to go, where we've got some manipulating room. And ultimately, if we can't come up with a balanced budget, then you have choices. You got layoffs, but that's going to reduce services anyhow. And the ultimate choice is when you set the millage rate and you say, okay, we just don't have enough money coming. The cash cow that we've had, which has been the hotels and all the taxes and so forth that go with them, all the tourist industry, that's withered up and dried to a great extent. Now, what are we going to have to do in the way of ultimately property tax adjustments? And
Ladies,
and
I
I
make an observation or a recommendation.
Okay,
Sure.
if you want to let Councilman Clay finish, though.
yeah, I'm essentially finished. I'm pretty much saying the same thing over in different ways.
Okay.
All right, may I please? So I just wish to clarify, when we made adjustments to the budget calendar, we actually went about a process along the lines of what you described, Councilman Clay, and that is having the individuals involved in enterprise fund operations with the intelligence and the data available to go about the process of revenue forecasting. And thus, in the case of sanitation, 12% reduction on the residential side, 13% reduction on the commercial side. So going into the new fiscal year, we're looking at fluid budget process. When I made introductory comments about this on Wednesday, April 8th, I talked about a lot of this being moving targets and so forth. So we'll do the best we can going forward with the proposed budget consideration for adoption in the next several weeks. However, when the new fiscal year begins post July 1, a number of adjustments will end up being made based on new realities, new information forthcoming. So that's a continuous process above and beyond just adopting the budget in June of 2020. This is a fluid process in many respects because there are a number of moving targets involved. So the 12% reduction on residential customers, 13% reduction on commercial customers was essentially a function of the process you talked about. Everybody coming together so that we can know what the forecast based on the information that we have. So will that likely change? Yes. Do we have the specific information to outline exactly what those changes will be? Not exactly, no, but we will get to that place as we go along in the administration, particularly the first quarter of the new fiscal year, July, August, and September. I talked about that rather cogently during our April 8th introductory comments, and thus that's what we're dealing with here. And the sanitation section and other enterprise fund operations are clear examples of us having to deal with that, particularly in the first quarter. So,
okay, are we good?
There's one other recommendation I'd like to make with regards to sanitation. So, Thea, we actually have a $32,000 contingency built in, $32,199.
That was one of my question marks.
Okay, so with that contingency, so what we can possibly do to address as an initial step, again, there's more to do as we engage the first quarter of the new fiscal year. We have an opportunity to make an adjustment probably on the convention center side and other city sales. So we can take that $32,199 figure, divide that at half and reduce the amounts on the convention center side and other city sales, just as a start, because we actually show increases in that regard. And the basis for the increases on the convention center are a function of the Gateway Center Arena at College Park. And we're still ascertaining as to what level of business activity will be experienced. There's some optimistic forecasts, there's some pessimistic forecasts. We really don't know. So eliminating the contingency, $32,199, dividing that by 2. So that's $16,100 off the convention center and $16,100 or $16,099 off other city sales, just to bring those numbers down right there. But based on information, data, et cetera, residential customers, residential and commercial customers with the 12 and 13% reductions respectively was actually based on data and some of the analysis ideas that you all talked about. But again, it will continue to be a moving target, and other adjustments would have to be made as we go along, and hopefully nothing terribly egregious.
Okay, Terrence, let me just ask you one question.
Sure.
And that is, let's say that we are short. And now now you said, well, we need to make budget adjustments.
Downward.
Yes,
Yep.
you're going to need to cut expenses, okay?
Yes.
So who's going to do that?
It's the office of the city manager's role and responsibility, working with all departments to get to that place. And I will simply come back to Mayor and City Council with a summary of recommendations.
And does that mean that we're going to go through this analysis all over again as a council?
As a city council, there may be an opportunity in August, after the first month of activity, first quarter of activity. There will be a review process involved to that effect. Yes, sir. When we're dealing with austerity measures, reductions in revenue, that's a very commonplace occurrence. So we will end up coming to the office of the city manager. We'll assemble recommendations, working with everybody involved, Department of Finance and Accounting, and every other fund, every other department that's involved in enterprise funds and other revenue outcomes, to let you all know what the TikTok is. So we're talking about more frequent review processes along those lines. That will become a role and function of Mayor and City Council. Again, as I emphasized today, as I emphasized back on April 8th, this year we're not talking about the adoption of a budget and then the mid-year budget adjustment exercise. We're talking about several experiences along the way, beginning with the very first quarter, because that's the critical time that, based on what I talked about before, in which activity will be low, and the budget adjustments or the decreased budget recommendations are a reflection of what's anticipated for the first quarter. So probably in August and September, we'll be back again. And that will become a role for this board of directors.
Okay, here's the challenge I'm having.
What is the last
The
date to
challenge
set the
I'm having-
millage rate?
Thank you. If I may, Mayor, I'd like to answer that question. The last date to set the millage rate will be in October, which is the beginning of the second quarter, which is the beauty thereof. So July, August, September, the first quarter, we'll have to spend a great deal of time and energy reviewing the moving targets associated therein, because that will assist us in making recommendations on the millage rate. So that goes hand in hand, and I'm glad you asked that question, Councilman Clay, for the reasons noted.
Okay.
I think the trouble I'm having with this process is that, and I'm hearing this from, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Councilman Clay or Councilman Allen, but based upon where we are right now on April 21st, even right now, these numbers feel too high. And if we go, and I understand that perhaps when we were discussing them a few weeks ago, that they seemed appropriate. But given the depth of everything that's happening in the world today, it still doesn't sit right. So it makes me uncomfortable to even rely on these numbers in any shape, way, or form. I understand that you keep on saying that we are going to be doing multiple adjustments. We're going to be looking at this. But it's hard for me to have confidence in these numbers. I mean, should I have any confidence in these numbers? Yes or no?
I'd like to comment. I mean, our finance director has already stated, and our city manager, that they've already talked with the directors and they came up with a percentage that they was comfortable with. They've already told us that. Now, I'm not an accountant. I'm not even gonna act like I'm an accountant. These are our professionals that we rely on. I think we should give them the confidence. And it is a budget. The city of Atlanta is only forecasting a 15% across the board. I heard the finance director said it today on TV. So my thing is, here's how I operate. There's nothing wrong with dialogue. We can talk till in the morning. I have no problem with talking. But what I'm simply saying is, either follow their direction or make a directive to them and act accordingly. But if we just continue to stay right here and don't come up with a solution, I'm going with what out there and Terrence has said. That's where I'm gonna take my direction from, because those are my professionals who have this expertise.
May I offer a recommendation? that
Hold
may-
on one second. Let me respond. Allow me to respond. Councilman Gay, your point is well taken, and I appreciate you bringing that level of perspective. I think you're right. So why don't we move forward? And does anyone have any questions on the sanitation fund beyond what we've already discussed?
Yeah, I do. It's not on the revenue side though, Mayor.
Okay,
On page 2 of 4, I see line 526140. Let me just make, am I looking at the right line? Yes, 526140 dog pound fees. That's jumping up to $15,000, and it's only been $7,000. Expenditure to date is about 6,000 plus, so I had to figure about 8 by the end of the quarter. Why would the dog pound fees go up so much?
It's the cost allocation we've been receiving from Fulton County. And the way we were receiving bills, it's been increasing significantly over previous years. So the way we were looking at it is that we may come very close to that $15,000 number there, the way we've been receiving our allocation from Fulton County.
Do we know why it's going up? That we have more dogs, or we have more people, or?
I think it's a combination of more dogs, a combination of their expense, trying
they're
to
trying
cover
to build a
their
new facility, aren't they?
yeah, they got all that is included. Their O&M, as well as their capital, is being passed on to their the other municipalities.
So
that
the mayor's right. So we're paying for their new dog pound.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I wanted to hear. And then on the next page, if you talk about line 527190 at the top, I'm sorry, 526600 at the top, workers' compensation. We had a lot of claim this year, apparently, and we are assuming it's going to be 0. And taking a clue from the mayor, that doesn't seem likely.
No, and that's probably one of those numbers that we're probably going to have to go back and allocate funds for. And I know that we work with the finance office as far as having funding available for those workman comp claims. So I think that's what's going to need to happen there.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay.
Any other questions or observations for sanitation, ladies and gentlemen?
No,
Mary,
I
you
don't.
okay?
Good.
Councilman Allen?
I'm good.
Councilman Gay?
547680, is that a 745,000? What is that? It's requested. Is that gonna be a truck they can't buy?
The
54,
vehicle replacement and capital outlay, $710,834. Yes, that was a major piece of equipment, and direction is being offered to sit tight for about a year.
okay.
Councilman Taylor, anything further, sir?
No, I'm good.
Great, thank you. Next would be stormwater utility.
Stormwater utility, again, sales to the convention center. We're not going to dwell on that. Jumping down the page 1 of 3, which is 115, page 115 in the packet, on right near the bottom, 5360, other equipment rental. What do we typically rent other equipment?
If we had a backhoe go down, or we need a bigger piece of equipment to do some detention pond maintenance,
Okay, so,
we would rent a larger. piece
okay,
of
so
equipment.
if it's zero, then maybe we wait a little longer until we get the equipment fixed.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Now on the next page, page 2 of 3, which is packet page 116. If we go down to the bottom, 61,11,000 or 1,100. Operation transfer out general. That is a transfer from water and sewer to help out the general fund. And it's 157,000. And if we don't achieve the revenue that we need in this fund due to utility bill payments, that is going to directly reflect back on the general fund. Just an observation, don't want to dwell on it. I'm
I
just saying
highlighted
that,
that line as well.
Oh, man.
okay, that's all I had. Oh no, I beg your pardon. What is, I'm sorry, page 3 of 3, what is line 582306, notes payable principal? No, I'm sorry, the one right above it. I didn't do a good job of highlighting here. This got set. It was debt service interest AARA, and it went from department head requested 54,775, and we're only putting in 36,529. How can we just do that? What got cut out? How can you cut out debt service?
That was a new request. That was based on a new piece of equipment you were going to lease in the next fiscal year, correct, Mike? And then we removed it. Was that a new piece of equipment? Because every debt service line item is budgeted and is accounted for. So at one point in time, you came in with a couple of pieces of equipment you would have requested to lease in the new fiscal year.
And that was cut out?
Yes,
So we should have cut out the debt service then too.
that's what hold on.
Yeah, and you did. You
Yeah,
did.
that's what we.
Yeah, you cut it out. You did the right thing.
But Mike, isn't that the case? There were several pieces of equipment you requested to lease next year versus purchasing right out. And then we removed those new pieces of equipment. There were several of them in different departments.
That's correct.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct.
Okay, that truly is it.
I got one question. 526150 engineering services. You had 50,000 down and it was cut to zero. What was the engineering services, or what were you going to do?
That was across the board in a lot of these accounts that I mentioned earlier about the engineering. The architectural design of a new facility,
Okay.
public works facility.
Okay.
Explanation until we actually move forward with a project, the design expenses will be part of that project. No need to do it here.
I got nothing else.
Councilman Gay, did you have anything further, sir?
No, sir.
Councilman Taylor, anything further, sir? You're muted, Councilman Taylor.
No, sir. I'm good.
Mayor Molly Broom, are you okay, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, very well. The remaining item for the Department of Public Works this evening is the water and sewer section. Again,
I have the same comment, Terrence, that I had before, and there's no point in repeating it all.
right,
All those revenue numbers are unreal, my
I
opinion.
had that same comment. But the
right.
revenue
Well,
number,
the aggregate reduction is right now at 11%. Again, a moving target for the same reasons and responses I've offered earlier. Both myself, Althea Philor Bradley, department directors involved in this process, this will be a continuous movement. So right now the aggregate reduction is 11%, not only from the initial forecast of keeping it flat for 2020, 2021 before the current state of affairs, but 11% decrease in revenues from the current fiscal year of 1920. So again, it's a bit of a moving target, and that's based on the intelligence we've gathered to date, thorough analysis in terms of where we are. So instead of a total outcome of 10.7 million, which was anticipated or is currently still being anticipated for the current fiscal year or thereabouts, we decided initially to keep that number flat as a conservative budgeting or revenue forecasting principle. We've actually reduced that by $1.2 million.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Okay.
I mean, I think we're all clear about it, and I think
Yeah.
we all. I think clear. I think we disagree. I think we can move on.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I've got some good news, actually. I think maybe on packet page 138, which is 404 here. We've got line items for sewer, water and sewer purchases, and those numbers appear to be way high. Because we don't have to pay for water that we don't use. And we don't have to worry about selling it on the spot market like we do with electricity.
That is absolutely correct.
And we don't have to pay for sewer purchases that we don't use, which is directly related to water.
And that would be
if you,
I'm sorry.
so if you look at the total of those two in current year is 2.7 million. And if you assumed it was linear, then you'd add another 900,000 to it, and it'd be 3.6 million. And you're in there for 6 million.
Hell yeah.
So that's 2.4 million to the good. And I don't know why those numbers were assumed to go up so much, but that is, unless I'm crazy, unless I'm reading this wrong, that's good news.
You're reading it correct, Councilman Clay. And part of the first quarter adjustment considerations on a revenue and expenditure forecast does take these opportunities into consideration. So we'll be working to get to that place, ladies and gentlemen, and that may very well likely be the case. But again, it's a bit premature to go in that direction, although there does exist merit to do so. So that will likely be an outcome the first quarter of the new fiscal year.
And then I would jump down to 547730, which is water line replacements. And obviously we're going to end up replacing some water lines. I've never seen it that lucky. So that's set to 0, but there's no point in talking about that given everything else. So
correct.
So that's all I had.
I do have a question about the line 61-1100, the transfer out to the general fund.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't happen, Mayor.
Yeah,
if we were short.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Mr. Mason, can you give me some guidance? Let me make sure that I'm not asking something that I can already find the answer for. 526590. 6590. The contingencies that were zeroed, I believe. Is that right? Oh, that wouldn't be there because they're zeroed, of course. Yes, the $551,000
Yes.
in contingencies that were zeroed.
Mm-hmm.
There's actual amount this year is 0. Can you highlight what is that all about?
That was revenue that came in above expenditures. So we kind of book it on the expenditure side, working with finance and accounting to balance the budget.
Okay.
So prior to the pandemic, we were anticipating revenues to exceed expenditures by that amount.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions on that section?
No, I'm good.
If not, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Mason, I'd like for you to please be excused. Of course, our executive team meeting tomorrow will be virtual. So at the conclusion of the executive team meeting tomorrow, Mike Mason, please join me in my office so that we can address the concerns that haven't been raised earlier relative to drivers, so that we can get that squared away and make sure that the process is as efficient as it needs to be. And whatever leadership
Sounds good.
I can offer, I will offer it.
Sounds fantastic.
All right, so I look forward to seeing you then. So unless there's any further questions of Mike Mason, I'd like to excuse him for the evening.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for your time. Appreciate
you.
your
Thank you,
hard-
Mayor, Council. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good morning,
guys.
Mike. Good night.
All right, bye.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Terrence.
Thank you. The remaining item for this evening is the Office of the City Engineer. It's its own budget operation. Pretty straightforward in this regard. So we have Loretta Washington with us, and for good measure, I've advised Loretta Washington earlier this morning relative to some minor purchases to get her operation up and running squared away. So she specifically asked about the prospect of securing an iPad, Red Car class, Adobe Pro printer. So a few $100s in expenditures in that regard. And my direction to her was, we have the ability to accomplish that in this current fiscal year. So I believe we're all on the same page now with respect to recommendations for the Office of the City Engineer with respect to the budget. And it is all 100% general fund dependent. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I yield to any questions or observations any of you may have. But Loretta Washington, I think we've done pretty well getting you all squared away with the Department of Finance and Accounting Office of the City Manager. And thus it's pretty straightforward in this regard. And we did make some adjustments in terms of expenditures the second time around.
Well, Karen, that makes a lot of sense. Hi, Loretta. Nice.
Hello.
Contractual services on 526170 on page 2 of 3, which is page 168 in the packet. What we set that to 0. And what was that in the past? That kind of information isn't in the backup since it was 0. And do we think that with Ms. Washington's qualifications, we don't need that contractual service anymore?
That's exactly right. So much of that, and the numbers aren't terribly reflected under the 2019 actual amount of 2020 amended budget, but the 2020 actual amount, 26,130, for example, much of that went towards Prime Engineering and their assistance in providing city engineering services. And we've actually made a number of intra-departmental budget adjustments to take care of that expense, including from the salary line item. So essentially, because Loretta is with us, she's a registered professional engineer in both Ohio and Georgia, I'd like to emphasize, and we're very proud of that. Thereby, we don't think there's a need in this regard.
Very good. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Yes, sir. And for some, and just to add further, the line item above, there's an engineering services line. So we actually reduced that allocation from $10,000 to $5,000 for any incidental external support that Ms. Washington may require in her role as city engineer. But again, she's very well supported, very well taken care of in terms of the needs in this regard. But I think the city of College Park is blessed to have her. And that's reflected in the proposed budget process, that blessing I just observed.
That's the only questions I had.
I don't have any questions. I just want to welcome you aboard.
Thank you. I look forward to meeting you all.
Yeah, in the flesh as opposed to virtually.
Exactly. Thank you.
So where are we on the Global Gateway Bridge at this point? I'm sorry.
Myers, I believe you're with us.
Washington, I mean, like, we have met in person, and welcome again. Sorry, I'm just hopping in.
Thank you. You asked a question about the Global Gateway Bridge?
Yes, ma'am. And perhaps that's a better question for Mr. Moore.
Yes.
So the Global Gateway Bridge, quite frankly, is still a moving target, assembling the funding at the federal level. So Jackson Myers, I believe you're with us. I'd like for you to give the approximate dollar amount assembled thus far. Somewhere in the neighborhood of over $600,000.
I didn't see Jackson on this. Oh, there he is.
Hello.
Right there. Hello.
Hello, everybody. So right now that we put in an application for a grant for ARC, Atlanta Regional Commission. We've met with them several different times. And right now we're looking at the bridge cost around $9 million to be exact.
So, I mean, I see the project, it looks like in fiscal year 2021, there's $6 million in costs.
We're hoping that we're figuring out what ARC, we're waiting on ARC. ARC was supposed to give us the information in March, then in April, but of course you understand what is happening. And we're looking at letting the project in right now with Georgia Department of Transportation, letting the project in June of 2020.
I'm sorry, we're doing what?
Jackson, does that interfere in any way with the pipeline?
No.
No, they're further apart, but
Well, I know it's at a different location, but it still crosses.
We do cross it, but we bridged the pipeline. So we don't have any problem with the pipeline because we bridged it. And
Good.
we gave it, and there's enough height in the bridge that keeps us, that they could go in and work underneath our bridge and replace the pipe if ever required.
Excellent.
So we have no interference, or they don't have any interference with our bridge structure.
I'm sorry, what did you say was happening in June? I didn't quite catch what you said.
It's called LET. That's what the Georgia Department of Transportation's term when they're going to give us a contract to actually construct the bridge.
So we're going to essentially get a contract in June, or we're on schedule to get a contract in June?
We are on schedule to get a contract in June, and we're also on schedule to get grant funds from Atlanta Regional Commission.
To the tune of $6 million?
No, not it'll be where the project is $9 million, and I'm asking for the $9 million. And of course, there'll probably be some percentage that we've got to contribute to it, which we've got money in the Fulton County T-Splosh, and I was trying to hold some money back because it's in the Clayton County Splosh. It's got some money that goes towards the bridge because the bridge is in Clayton County.
That would be good.
When will we, if everything went well, when would we start moving dirt?
If everything went well, it usually takes about 60 days from the time we get the contract, the time we do the bidding.
So August?
Yeah, so by the time we get back to mayor and council, let them know what's going on, how we're going to phase it, or what we're going to actually do at this time.
So August?
We're hoping August would be a good time to start moving dirt for the bridge.
Okay.
But right now, I can't even get a hold of Atlanta Regional Commission to find out what's going on.
Right. So August would be a best date, not a.
We have to assume the fall.
The fall, yeah. I agree with you, Mayor. Yes, ma'am.
Before the snow falls.
Oh, I hope so, very much before the snow falls.
Yeah.
If we ever have snow again.
Yes, sir. But I mean, it's been a long time coming, and it's been a weekly phone call. Believe me, a weekly phone call on keeping up with the project manager at Georgia DOT, as well as making sure that all the sub parts of Georgia DOT, from the bridge structural engineers at Georgia DOT, are on board with everything. And I want to take time to also, Public Works has been real instrumental in helping us with this project too.
another question about a budget suggestion for other than originating department that you filled out. The elevated water storage tank and booster.
Yes, ma'am.
I get the reason for requesting. It's plain and simple.
We only have 2 elevated tanks right now, and we putting in additional hotels. If the Sheridan AC, of course, is coming up, we've got 2 more hotels that are, or at least 1 more hotel that's coming in at the 6 West. Then we got 2 hotels that have been promised out there at the park and ride, Wally
Right.
Park.
Right.
You know,
right.
and then right now, Public Works is going through a water model study right now that's going to tell us our either we're good to go or we're shortfalls. But as we get another 2 more hotels that talked about right by the Sheridan on the at the convention center, back of the convention center, that's still, it's a water demand. So we just got to take a look at, make sure that we have enough elevated tanks in the air to support the fire department.
Okay, so that's
Right.
sort of a longer range. I mean, like after the study would be.
Yes, after the study. The study's ongoing now, from my understanding, and they've started to study. The contract's been signed, and they're working towards that.
Got it. And would we be able to receive any assistance for another tower? Would that be something that we could partner with any of our local or regional authorities for? Or would that be something we'd have to bear the cost of ourselves?
I've looked at a lot of lists. I have not found anything. I've done the best I can, but I have not found anything for elevated tanks or any kind of storage tanks that would help us. I could go back, but the only thing we could get was a loan. And I've been talking to GFA over the last couple of weeks because they're the ones that give us loans. And I've been kind of keeping an eye out on their website to see if we can get a grant like we did in 2009. If we could get a forgiveness grant to be able to purchase an elevated tank, that would be a great opportunity for the city, because we got $5 million from them and they had a $3 million forgiveness. So I've been kind of watching GFA with that, see what they're coming up with. That's the only place I can figure out right now.
All right. And the ridership allocation study at the APM, what your reason for requesting that? I mean, I'm assuming it's blank, but I have my ideas, but if you want to fill it in for me.
Well, I just felt that with the new parking deck that's coming on board, we just need to make sure that what their numbers that we're relying on others to give us the numbers of ridership out there. And we know that a lot of MARTA has been utilizing our station too by dropping off and picking up people. So every time that they drop off and pick up, that gets counted. So we're hoping that the count is going to be right. So I just feel that we should follow up on what the numbers they are really giving us and what we're really paying for. And if we don't do an audit, then we're just taking it at face value.
Good idea.
Yep, I agree. And that isn't anywhere in the budget though, right?
That's correct. That was just one of my suggestions.
Gotcha. Okay. I doubt we'd be able to find partnerships to get that done.
The only thing that we could do is through the partnerships. So we have I lost the word. I apologize. Maybe Terrence, you can help me out. But it's a homeowners association out there with all the hotels at the convention center, and that we could probably partner with them because they have a vested interest in making sure that that we're not getting overcharged, which in fact they get overcharged for the right
to them, right?
Yeah, so it's a win-win for the office buildings out there and the hotels and BMW and the other future hotels that are coming in, that they make sure that the charges are spot on.
That makes a lot of sense. It may be a bit of a difficult push right now, but down the
Oh,
road.
of course. Last
when-
time we
when-
had a meeting with them about this, I believe was July of last year. Right, Terrence, you were in that meeting. We had a meeting over there with all the general managers.
July 2019, a representative of the Gateway Center complex is what you're talking about. And
That's correct.
guidance was offered at that time, so here we are. So in all likelihood, we will initiate a follow-up discussion, probably in the early part of the new fiscal year, similar timeframe as last year. From there, a specific recommendation should be offered.
And the Road Street design and construction. Is that not part of 6 West?
That was my understanding, that what Artie was talking about yesterday evening.
Okay.
Yeah, because he was talking about the road network in there and the school system.
And so that would, but is that something that we need to? That's okay. That's okay. We can address that a little bit later.
I understand.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions about engineering?
Nope.
If not,
Right.
ladies and gentlemen, that concludes tonight's exercise. We will reconvene again tomorrow via Zoom program virtually, and the principal focus is all sections and operations of the College Park Police Department, and will likewise also touch on car rental tax fund and destination marketing organization in terms of what the city's distribution requirements will be, a little bit of background and education in terms of how that works. Likewise, same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow, 6:30 here at the City of College Park.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.